I just want it to be known that I did the live-action bearded knockoff Superman Heat Vision before Butcher did. I didn't do it better, but I did it first. Season 3 of The Boys has come and gone now, and I think it's fair to say it did not disappoint. Yeah, I know, I'm understating it by a mile. Initially, I set out to pick and talk about the best scene in the finale, but after rewatching the finale, I don't think that's very realistic, because there are so many great scenes, each one amazing for almost completely different reasons. Instead, I want to focus on the climactic showdown this entire season built up to, and how well it did or didn't hit the mark. Now don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed the sequence. I actually think it's narratively one of the better, if not one of the best, final conflicts in an action show in modern television. It was so close to being perfect, but it just narrowly misses out on true perfection. And in this instance, I don't think it's a problem in the script or the character dynamics or anything quite like that. Like I said, it's narratively beautiful, which is probably not a word used to describe The Boys often, but I stand by it. So let's dive in and start breaking this down. And just a point of clarification here, the final confrontation is really more a sequence of scenes, and it lasts like 14 minutes. So I'm really just talking about the scenes in this conflict that involve Butcher, Maeve, Soldier Boy, and of course, Homelander. For the sake of this discussion, Kimiko and Frenchie's lab quest will be ignored, and I'm not going to spend any time on Huey's contribution either. Oh, and you know what? I haven't mentioned it yet, and it should be obvious, but I'm going to say it now. Spoilers ahead. If you haven't watched the episode yet, make like Homelander and fly on out of this video. Or fly away from watching, but you know what I mean. Okay, so the confrontation begins with the arrival of Billy, Maeve, and Soldier Boy, while Homelander watches old propaganda of Soldier Boy, where the older soup uses basically the same catchphrase Homelander does. It's a little detail, but a genius one that shows us just how similar these two characters are. And that's important because we just learned how much Soldier Boy actually kind of hates himself. This entire scene is far and away the best portion of this confrontational sequence for a few reasons. Firstly, as we, the audience, genuinely don't know what Soldier Boy is going to do. Even Butcher and Maeve aren't sure, and you can see it in their reactions. Hell, I think even Soldier Boy wasn't sure, and Jensen Ackles did an amazing job of bringing that uncertainty and inner conflict to the outwardly stoic character. You can read on his face that he's mostly made up his mind, but he's looking for something in Homelander. Something to swing his decision toward uniting with his son. But he doesn't find it. Instead, Homelander reveals Ryan and becomes emotional. For Homelander, this is everything he's always wanted, and he's let his guard down throughout the season gradually more and more, starting to wear his emotions on his sleeve. You can see how desperately he wants this, how badly he wants his father's attention and love. And that, ironically, is what seals the deal for Soldier Boy. To him, this emotional vulnerability is weakness. It's not what a real man would do in the eyes of this 100-year-old school macho man. It's the reason he's in denial of his own PTSD, and it all stems from his need for love and approval from his father that he also never got. It's an incredibly well-written tragedy of intergenerational trauma. Soldier Boy's father convinced him, deep down, that he was a disappointment.
He said I took a shortcut. That a real man wouldn't have cheated.
And now he can't help but see his own son as equally disappointing. Tragically, he chooses in this scene to reject his chance to be a father and grandfather because he believes Payback and Vought robbed him of the chance to do it the right way. Everything about this moment works so well, from the disgust, remorse, and self-hatred Soldier Boy conveys, and the shock and exposed insecurity in Homelander, to the mix of relief and borderline sadistic giddiness of Butcher and Maeve. Taken by surprise and outgunned, they have Homelander dead to rights. I think it's worth noting here how Butcher reacts to Ryan's presence during this attempted murder, because he clearly knows in this moment that it's not safe for Ryan, urging and screaming for Ryan to get out, but he's still making the conscious decision that killing Homelander is more important than protecting Ryan. Because anyone with kids knows that just yelling at a kid to do something almost never works, especially if you're actively murdering their biological father while you tell them and scream at them. In this moment, Butcher's willing to risk Ryan's life to get the job done. Now, we have all expected Ryan to be a wild card, tide-turning character since he was introduced. And he does that now, in a way that I don't think anyone really saw coming. And Soldier Boy's violent retaliation primes us for a couple of the most interesting moments in all of The Boys so far, in my humble opinion. It tells us so much about every character in that room. So let's get the obvious one out of the way.
Little shit.
Soldier Boy doesn't care one bit that he concussed a child, proving that despite his proclamation to Huey otherwise earlier in the season, that he is, indeed, a bad guy. Not just a bad guy, but one of the worst kinds, who's willing to not only hit a child, his grandson, but also kill him. And with that, he also becomes a symbolic stand-in for another character. More on that in a bit. And next up, Maeve lets go of Homelander when she sees Ryan get hurt. It's subtle, our attention isn't drawn to it, but it's true. There's no grappling to keep hold of him, she just lets Homelander slip away. This is our first visual hint in this scene that Maeve doesn't really believe no matter the cost. She's going to prove herself a true hero. And then, more noticeably, there's Homelander's reaction. Genuine parental terror and concern. Real positive human emotions. He turns his back on the man trying to kill him. For Homelander, this is a big, big deal. In any other instance, we'd expect him to go for retribution first, but he doesn't. He's willing to risk dying out of concern for Ryan. It doesn't in any way redeem him for the monstrosities that he has and will continue to commit, but it shows us that there's a human left inside him somewhere, and it may just be telling us that Ryan isn't going to defeat Homelander in battle someday. Maybe nobody is. But we may be looking at a hint toward an emotional, ideological, or psychological defeat for Homelander in the future. And then there's Butcher. A man waking up, an obsessed, traumatized addict seeing firsthand how he's no better than his own father. Sure, he didn't hit Ryan the way that young Denethor hit Lenny. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, his dad is Denethor. But he emotionally hurt him and abandoned him the same way that he abandoned Lenny. Huey couldn't get through to Butcher, especially not on the V-24, but this does. And in this moment, we watch Butcher decide, symbolically, to stand up to his father by standing up to Soldier Boy. It's a fight he knows he'll lose, and he knows he's sacrificing his one shot to fulfill his obsessive mission, but he does it anyway. Could this mean that Butcher will have a more redemptive arc in the show than he does in the comics? Maybe. Only time will tell. And when Butcher makes his decision to save Ryan, and therefore also Homelander, we then get one of the coolest shots in The Boys. It's so much more impactful than the cliche dueling laser eyes that we got earlier in the season. It shows us two of the most violent, hateful archenemies in TV history choosing family and their desire to be better than their own fathers over their all-consuming blood feud. It's weirdly hopeful, even though we know they'd kill each other the next chance they get. Now for me, this is where the climactic sequence starts to lose some of its oomph. I wouldn't say it falls apart, because it definitely doesn't. It's just that as it moves into the actual fight scenes, it doesn't have as much impact as the character conflict that got us here. Ironically, I think that's because, partially, it's not big enough. There's not enough chaos, madness, and destruction to match the setup and characters. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this should have been like a Man of Steel situation with skyscrapers falling. Not by any means. Generally speaking, close quarters personal conflicts like this one are more effective than CGI-fueled kaiju-level smackdowns. And the actors do also give a fantastic performance throughout this conflict. The problem, instead, in my view, is twofold. First, we know the power and destruction that these characters are capable of, even by accident.
What happened?
And that far outstrips what happens on screen during this fight. Consider that Maeve, objectively known to be physically less powerful than Homelander or Soldier Boy, once crumpled an entire truck without flinching. Now in this supposedly knockdown, drag-out fight with 4 highly powered supes, plus Starlight, Kimiko, and Mother's Milk, the best we get is shattered glass, broken desks, and dents in a floor and filing cabinet. It just doesn't live up to what we consciously or otherwise have come to expect from this conflict. Now reason 2 is that the emotional stakes were already set higher than a fight can live up to. We reached a crescendo for most of these characters when Soldier Boy metaphorically twists the knife in Homelander's heart and wakes Butcher from his hate and drug-addled state of mind. No amount of close quarters combat was ever going to top that, so maybe they shouldn't have tried. Now, I suspect this seemingly watered-down fight probably was due to budget and/or time constraints. And I don't want to begrudge the showrunners, cast, and crew of that very real limitation. They also needed to keep this whole ensemble in the same general space for their climax here, and Maeve's sacrifice to have any impact and make any sense. I'll admit that would have been a lot harder if Butcher and Maeve were wiping out floor after floor in Vought with their fight. That also brings me to another caveat in my critique here of the fight sequence. Maeve and Homelander. I loved how they handled the fight scene between these two characters specifically. At the outset, Homelander views Maeve as literally no threat to him because he's physically so much stronger.
Now, Maeve, we have bigger fish.
I don't.
I said, not now.
His hubris is on full display. Meanwhile, Maeve shows Homelander and us just what raw skill and months of intensive training can do. It's probably not enough to fully overpower and kill Homelander, and Maeve knows that, but she tries anyway. Dominique McElligott, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, I've never heard it out loud, brings so many levels to this fight, shifting from intense determination to surprised, almost smug satisfaction, to desperation and rage, and then finally to the heroism that Maeve has pushed so deep down over the years. Seriously, I gasped out loud in pleasantly surprised shock when she jammed that metal rod into Homelander's ear. It was glorious and also excellent sound design. Maeve's contribution to this scene and this conclusion of her arc were almost literally perfect. Frankly, my only complaint here with her part of this scene is nothing to do with the scene itself, but rather that they absolutely undermine her sacrifice by revealing later she somehow survived. Which I think is just blatantly stupid. She lost her powers taking that hit from Soldier Boy, then dropped like another 12 stories, maybe more, and survived? Even if she had her powers, that fall would have been brutal. And it looked like she fell into a dumpster, too? Like, that cushioned her anyway, it's not part of the sequence, so I'll leave it be. I digress. There is one other aspect to this whole sequence that I'm conflicted on. The close-ups. I swear I don't think I've ever seen so many close-ups, and slow-mo close-ups, in a single 14-minute stretch of TV ever. Were they great? Mostly. Karl Urban and Dominique in particular really shined in these moments. And of course so did Erin Moriarty, but a little more literally for at least one of those close-ups. The director and actors were able to convey a lot of information through glances and expressions this way, but I also wonder if it wasn't just too much. I haven't literally counted the close-ups, and maybe I'm being too harsh here, but in cinematography and film, I do think there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. And this may be an example of that. But I'll leave that to you guys. Did you think the close-up shots were overused in this showdown? And what did you think of this finale sequence? Am I totally off base here, calling it mostly perfect, or was it even more perfect than I'm giving it credit for? I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments down below. And if you'd like to dive into even more boys content, I'd recommend checking out my video essay on Homelander here, or you can check out my own superhero short film, Punishment, right here. Because who doesn't want more anti-heroes and heat vision? Seriously. Thanks so much for watching Story Arc. I'm Jonathan, and I will see you next time, film friends.